You might think that inflation is a normal part of life, but the reality is that your purchasing power is silently being stolen from you every single day by the very institutions claiming to protect it. Central banks have the power to print infinite amounts of currency at the push of a button, which dilutes your savings and forces you to work harder just to stay in the same place. They control the supply, so they control the value, and Bitcoin completely flips this power dynamic on its head. It's the only asset in human history with strictly finite supply that cannot be altered by any government or chairman. There is no backdoor and there is no print button because the code is absolute. And while fiat currency relies on trust in politicians, Bitcoin relies on mathematical verification, and it's created by actual power and resources. This is not just about digital currency or making a quick trade. This is about the separation of money and state and ownership. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Bitcoin renders the central banking model obsolete and why it's the ultimate hedge against the system designed to devalue your life's work. Let's dive into it. Let's go and let's jump into how central banks hold a monopoly on the money supply. So as you know, things have to be systematically processed when it comes to central banks of systematic formations, such as wire transfers or direct deposit, for instance. Certain things have to hit on certain days and certain time frames due to the fact that approvals have to be made by the centralized banks. Now, when we're trading cryptocurrency, you're working in the decentralized world. Everything is way different. Okay, everything is based off the peer-to-peer transaction system. Everything works off of smart, autonomous contracts. So whenever transactions are sent over, pretty much computers do all the processing. When you send a wire transfer over to somebody or even to yourself to another bank, the bank has the ability to approve or decline that. Cryptocurrency puts the freedom back in the people's hands. And let's go and let's jump into how all this works and why central banks really don't like this. So let's talk about the loss of monopoly. So central banks manage the economy by printing money, which is quantitative easing or pretty much restricting it. And Bitcoin supply is fixed at 21 million. So it having that fixed statistic baked into it, one, not only makes it more scarce, but it's going to have a more baseline stability cooked into it, and inflation is going to be a lot more manageable. When it comes to fiat currency, you can pretty much print infinite dollars nonstop. That's you might see things from 10 years ago might cost completely differently from today, since more money has been printed over the years have gone over. Okay, and the competitor. So for the first time, citizens now have a viable opt-out option. So if a central bank debases its currency due to inflation, people can flee to things like Bitcoin. And this forces central banks to be more disciplined, limiting their power. So you might have seen things recently as of 2025 when this video is coming out. Banks are now starting to incorporate certain things like Ethereum, XRP, and Bitcoin systems within their system, since they know that people are now looking towards cryptocurrency to manage their money or even hold their savings. So instead of getting 2% or 3% APY stands for annual percentage yield, people rather go put their money into a cryptocurrency and let their money grow faster at a rapid rate. And not only that, it's going to be a lot more manageable too. If you go to the bank, if you have 10 bands, you go pull up on the bank, a lot of the times you're not going to be able to pull that out right away. You might have to come back tomorrow, the next day, because the bank has your money pretty much invested. Okay, so if our money's parked in the bank, it's going to be their money too. It's being used. That's why certain things like Zelle have withdrawn deposit amounts, because they don't want people just pretty much managing their currency how they want. Cryptocurrency takes that all the way. If you want to send $1 million today and tomorrow, you can do that. With the normal traditional central bank based off of fiat currency, they're not going to let you do that, since that puts too much freedom in people's hands, and a lot of business moves can be made a lot quicker. So instead of the banks having the power, now people have the ability to build certain things like banks, their own hedge fund systems, and their own funds, etc. So now people have the ability to have some more individualization for their family even as well too, versus having to run to the banks every single time. So back in the day, people would have to keep all their cash in the banks for the most part. Okay, things aren't like that today. Now you have the ability to even keep your cryptocurrency on something small like a USB drive. Okay, so keeping it extremely decentralized, and the IRS can't get to your USB drive unless they raid your house and find it or things like that. Okay, so no more having random money put out of your account, or even if you get sued, for example, they can go into your bank accounts and clear you out. If you have your money parked in cryptocurrency, that's money that they can't touch, and it's pretty much digital cash that nobody really knows that exists. So let's talk about the threat of censorship resistance. The modern banking system is used as a tool for geopolitical control and surveillance. Big on surveillance. They want to see every dollar that's coming in and out. A lot of things have been changing recently too, since 2020 plus. As far as cash, for example, you can't really use cash to get certain things. Like a lot of realtors and realtor companies won't accept cash for certain down payments, since you can't really prove that you're a real legitimate person and where that money's actually coming from. Okay, so central banks want to make sure everything is controlled and pretty much don't want you to have freedom for certain ways that benefit them every single time. Certain ways it does protect society, but for the most part, things aren't always fair and realistic, because it is the world. So if somebody's working hard at their lawn mowing business and they've been stacking up cash, okay, their money shouldn't be obsolete. So now you have things like cryptocurrency where you're going to be able to put that, send that over to your bank account, and then you could file your taxes and do things a little bit more legitimately there, versus just having random cash come out of thin air and then you deposit it and they're like, well, where's this coming from? Okay, so your cryptocurrency can be baked in and a little more hidden, and it'll help you out in a lot of ways too. And Bitcoin is really a neutral, permissionless network, and it helps you bypass sanctions. Systems like SWIFT allow the US to cut off nations or individuals from global finance. And Bitcoin operates on the peer-to-peer network, just like we talked about in the previous slide. Meaning if you want to send $1,000 to somebody in Africa, you can instantly do that within the next couple of minutes if you wanted to. Okay, if you want to do that via PayPal or the traditional bank system, it's going to be a lot more difficult. They're going to put some type of hold on it, have to verify your transaction, and it's going to be just a lot more difficult overall, making financial blockages significantly harder to enforce. And financial privacy is going to be a big factor as well too. So Bitcoin is going to be pseudo-anonymous. Central banks and governments prefer total visibility due to the fact that KYC laws are in place, know your customer, and AML, to track taxation for the most part. So pretty much just the government wants their piece of the pie when it comes to any type of currency. So a decentralized ledger obscures the identity layer that they rely on. So certain things like the SEC were fighting with Bitcoin legislators, etc., and that led to certain dips. But now the US government and other governments have started holding the currency themselves, and certain laws have been getting passed. So central banks are trying to gain control, but for the most part, Bitcoin at the core forefront of it is still peer-to-peer and a currency based off of freedom. So we'll jump into the neutralization of interest rates. Interest rates are going to be the steering wheel of the economy, and Bitcoin creates a parallel system that doesn't respond to that steering wheel. And the liquidity trap. When the Fed lowers the rates to stimulate the economy, they want people to spend pretty much. So if people instead borrow cheap fiat to buy Bitcoin, which is a store of value, since especially it has a limited cap, giving it scarcity, which is immediately going to give it value, the stimulus leaks out of the real economy and into crypto assets, because people are starting to wake up as well. And broker and transition mechanisms are going to come into place. If a significant portion of the economy uses Bitcoin for settlement, central bank decisions, which involves raising or lowering rates, affect fewer people, rendering the central bank increasingly irrelevant. So it's like trying to slow down a car by pressing the brakes, but the car has decoupled from the wheels. Okay. So Bitcoin's coming in to solve a lot of problems, especially now since people are starting to be more open to international travel too, and living in certain other countries, especially US citizens. And you're gonna, instead of have to go through certain transfers for your US currency, you can easily just keep everything in cryptocurrency and spend that all over the world simply, instead of having to go through that headache of a transfer system. And let's talk about CBDCs, the counter move, and what are they doing about it? So they're copying tech, but keeping the control, and enter the central bank digital currencies, and it's programmable money. So unlike Bitcoin, CBDCs are centralized, and governments could theoretically program money to expire, which forces spending, and restrict what you can buy with carbon limits or freeze accounts instantly. And definitely total surveillance is going to come into place too. So a CBDC ledger would give the state a real-time view of every single transaction in the economy, eliminating the concept of cash-like privacy entirely. And they market CBDCs as safe, convenient Bitcoin, but the reality is that it's the exact opposite of Bitcoin ethos of decentralization. So keeping the freedom in the people's hands is really the main point of crypto. Yes, there's money involved, but honestly, you can make way better profit doing other things, such as like trading futures, for example. Even if you trade crypto futures, that's gonna be way more profitable than holding and keeping spot. But as far as you holding your Bitcoin, your cryptocurrency, you're really doing it for your ownership and your assets. Okay, having ownership, especially in something that helps the future, is what's going to help you prepare your forward and keep your money in that constant cycle. So instead of you being on the hamster wheel, put your money on the hamster wheel. have everything flow. Okay, so after you get that big bag from futures, let's say for example, you know to go ahead and throw it into Bitcoin, which consistently makes profit year after year after year after year. So instead of you having to hustle and bustle forever, you could maybe sit down and chill because you have enough money from hustling and bustling stacked in your investments, and then your wheel will be spinning forever. Okay, so if you decide to use your fiat currency and throw it into something that's gonna help your money flow into the hamster wheel, inshallah, you'll have a lot easier time. So they try and stop everything, just like they try and stop certain herbs as well too. They can't stop the Bitcoin network itself since it's distributed globally, and they target the entry and exit points and targeting on ramps. So regulators pressure banks to not do business with crypto exchanges, even though they're starting to do it anyways, because they know people have to sign up for their banks, otherwise they're gonna crumble. So if you can't transfer fiat to an exchange, it becomes very difficult to buy Bitcoin. And let's talk about some regulation by enforcement. So instead of creating clear laws, agencies like the SEC sue crypto projects to drain their resources and create uncertainty, driving innovation offshore. But thank God, it's been a lot of righteousness going on. Certain people have been getting freed from jail, such as like the Binance creator and Bybit and stuff like that has been starting to get back on the United States soil. So a couple of years ago, around 2022, 2021, they started locking people up for enforcing certain cryptos or creating certain crypto brokers such as Binance and stuff like that. Thank God certain people have been freed, and just really things have been changing, and the crypto future is starting to look bright, especially since the US government now owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth it. That's really a solid and good factor, letting us know that, okay, the US doesn't want to fall behind since other countries also own hundreds of millions of dollars worth it too. Okay, so instead of being stubborn, the US is now actually turning on their brain, and that's leading crypto to future all-time highs, since the US dollar is the global currency of the world. But we never know, within a couple of decades, could be Bitcoin. So a lot of things are changing, exciting time in the world, and central banks are pretty much earning a game theory by they can't end Bitcoin. The network is way too resilient and distributed, so they're pretty much trying to conform because they know people are starting to wake up. The righteousness is starting to oversee the darkness in the world for sure. People are starting to care about their health, want freedom for their money, and people might have family in other countries too, and you can easily help out your family in other countries with cryptocurrency. Once again, not as easy to do that if you're sending straight fiat in any country you're in. And they can't ignore it. Okay, it's sucking liquidity out of the fiat system. People are no longer keeping their money stacked inside of savings accounts, getting that 2%, 3% APY that most banks take advantage of in order to make profit. People are now just taking that money and putting it right into cryptocurrency. Even the same thing with credit too. A lot of people are starting to wake up when it comes to credit. Instead of balling out, just buying things, people are now taking that, either investing in all of it into some kind of business and buying cryptocurrency, buying any type of shares that they can too with the cash that you can extract from the credit card if you can't extract the whole thing. So the likely outcome of everything, integration, and that's been slowly happening. A lot of banks are starting to finally realize, and as we start seeing more younger people get into CEO level positions, I can see things change as well too, inshallah, especially as Trump come into office. The crypto support has definitely been in significant rise. So banks will eventually have to custody Bitcoin and treat it as a reserve asset, just like gold, because they know people aren't going to be going for anything else. Okay, people are now more open to leaving the US more than ever. So now the US is very desperate to make the right decisions to keep people here and keep America going forward. So this fundamentally changes how the global monetary system operates in the long run. And a really small percentage of the world only owns Bitcoin. So don't think that you're too late. You're really early, and there's a limited amount. Okay, you don't want Bitcoin to be mined up and be like, oh man, I wish I bought Bitcoin in 2025. You don't want to be doing that. Okay, I don't care if you got $5 in your account right now. You don't need to be buying nothing. Go buy some Bitcoin. Okay, live off the credit card, spend all your cash on assets, and watch how your life change. Wake up, pray to God, take care of your family, stay down, and get in stack mode. I'm gonna catch you on the next one.